Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Surrey Board of Trade. I am Rona Doria, Events and Sponsorship Coordinator of the Surrey Board of Trade. I want to welcome you to today's Digital Impact Learning Lab, a leader's guide to mental health. I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions during the session, please put your questions or comments in the chat function and we will get back to them as soon as we can. If we are unable to answer your questions, we will get back to you after the session is over. I acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katsi, Kwiketlam, Kakite, Semiahmoo, and the Tuasan First Nations. As well, I acknowledge the Inuit and Métis Nations peoples who live and work on these territories. This workshop is co-hosted by the South Surrey and White Rock Chamber of Commerce and the Surrey Board of Trade, soon to come together as the Surrey and White Rock Board of Trade. We are currently awaiting federal government approval, which we anticipate in the fall. Together, we will be a stronger voice for all businesses. Please check our diversified portfolios at businessinsurrey.com and sswrchamberofcommerce.ca. Your facilitators this morning are from LIDA HR, an innovative equity, diversity, and inclusion consulting practice. LIDA helps HR organizations to disrupt and evolve processes and practices to create equitable, people centered workplaces. Partners Christine Bauer and Annika Lofstrand each bring over 20 years of experience within human resources with a decade each of specialization in EDI. Christine has led work in EDI strategy development, disability, inclusive employment programs, mental health awareness, and psychologically safe and healthy workplaces. She is a published author, writer, and editor with a focus on accessibility and inclusive learning. Annika has created and implemented HR and EDI strategies and plans and provides consulting on welcoming and respectful workplace cultures. She is a post-secondary workshop facilitator and a coach to senior leaders and teams on leadership effectiveness, EDI awareness, and inclusive leadership. Christine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rona. We are delighted to be with you today, so thank you so much. We want to take a moment also to express our deep, heartfelt gratitude to Indigenous peoples across this land. I'm actually joining you today. I live in Maple Ridge, but I'm joining you today from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Very delighted to be here. And so I want to also recognize the Indigenous peoples of this land, upon which I am truly a guest today. The city of St. John's is on the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk people. I'd also like to honor the diverse histories and cultures of the Mi'kmaq, Innu, Inuit, and Southern Inuit of this province. And as I mentioned, I live in Maple Ridge, so that is the really beautiful territory of the Katsi First Nation. And Annika is joining from gorgeous South Surrey White Rock, and that is certainly the beautiful territory of the Semiahmoo First Nations. Indigenous peoples have been the traditional custodians of these lands since time immemorial, and we're very grateful. So thank you so much. So today we've got an hour, not a lot of time really to talk about a topic that actually is pretty complex, but we hope that we're able to distill this topic down into a few memorable things that you can take away from today. So some of the things that we're going to talk about is what are the symptoms of burnout and some of the other common mental health challenges that people are facing. We're going to talk about two legal imperatives, the duty to inquire and the duty to accommodate. We'll also talk about something that is, I would say for me, and probably Annika will agree, is that the number one question we get asked from people leaders is, how do I talk to my employees about mental illness? If I think they're struggling, what do I say? What do I do? So we're going to talk about that and try to make it, something that is certainly not easy. We're going to make it a little more simple, hopefully. And then the next thing we get asked is, but their performance, it's suffering. It's not quite what it was. Do I performance manage them, or do I coach? Do I provide accommodations? How do I determine if their performance is because of a mental health challenge or maybe just bad behavior. And then we're going to explore a little bit around a topic that we think is your superpower, which is empathy. And coupled with that, we're going to explore a little bit about curiosity as well. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say something, which is that we're going to be talking about mental health, which means we will also be talking about mental illness. We haven't put anything in this that we're trying to trigger anything in anybody, but sometimes when we're talking about these topics, it can be heavy. So if you feel like you need to step away, do what you need to be healthy. The other thing that we'll say is that it's actually Mental Health Week in Canada. So it's the CMHA, Canadian Mental Health Association's Mental Health Week. It's a different theme every year, and that this year it is unmasking mental health. And so as we go through our time together today, Anik and I are both people who have experienced mental health challenges, and so we may share a little bit of our own experiences just to help, take the mask off a little bit. All right, so today we're really talking about managers and people leaders and mental health. So we want to share some statistics with you, some research. We're also going to share some anecdotes, some of the things that we've experienced in the work with our clients over the years. And I will say before we go any further that we're not doctors, we're not mental health professionals. So we're going to not give you medical advice, but we want to share some research-based findings as well. And I should say that this slide deck will be available after the session, so it will have all of the sources and the resources in it for you. We know that managers play a significant role in the overall well-being of an employee. I think we've all experienced that when we've had good managers and not so good managers. Research from Catalyst shows that 45% of employee experiences of inclusion are explained by their manager's inclusive leadership behavior. It's important to know that as a manager or a small business owner, you don't have to know everything about mental illness. You don't, and it's impossible. You're not a psychologist, you're not a doctor. But you should know some things, both for your own overall mental health and well-being, but also to be able to spot the signs of possible mental illness in an employee. So on the next slide, we're going to talk just a little bit about well-being and organizational performance. So there was a study conducted by Gallup of approximately 29,000 employees across 10 industries and 15 countries that found a connection between organizations that prioritize employee well-being and organizational performance. In organizations where employees believed that well-being was not only prioritized, but also well managed, so that's the key right there, it was prioritized and well managed, organizational performance was more than 2.5 times greater than for those where employees rated health and well-being as poorly managed. 2.5 times, it's pretty powerful, that number. So the message really here is clear. When organizations focus on the human, not just the worker, both the organization and the person are healthier. Now, this is research that we found in a really great book. It's called Wellbeing at Work, and that's the source on the bottom of the slide, How to Build Resilient and Thriving Teams by Jim Clifton and Jim Harder. Those names may sound familiar because these are also the guys behind StrengthsFinders, so if you're familiar with that. Now, we've got a question for you. We just want you to pause and consider this. Do you consider healthcare for your employees an investment or a cost? One area that really must change is organizations have to start looking at healthcare and wellness benefits as an investment versus being managed as a cost. Leaders must make this shift to view health and wellness as an investment and a recruiting attractor to stand out in offering more employee-assisted benefits focused on well-being and using approaches that are proactive versus reactive. We must get upstream of things like burnout and mental illness. And so I think when we use the word cost, for me, I associate that with something bad's happened or this person's ill and now we have to pay this bill. But if we look at it from an investment, we really are looking at it in terms of, what are the things that we can do preemptively or to mitigate the chance that an employee will experience psychological injury in the workplace. There are a lot of things that go into mental illness and mental health that we'll touch on a little bit in a minute. But what can we do in the workplace to mitigate the negative effects of maybe how we work? So let's talk a little bit about burnout, because burnout is, boy, that's a word and a phrase that we use a lot, we hear a lot. Used to be stress. Stress used to be the word. I think when I first started my career, that was the word du jour in the 90s. Um, but let's explore what this is. Back in 2019, the World Health Organization classified burnout as an occupational phenomenon. That's the language that they use. And the number one category of disability worldwide is due to mental health related issues. So that's not just in Canada. That's not just in North America. That is worldwide. So we know that we have some serious mental health issues that are happening. And so how can we get ahead of these things? So I said a moment ago, there are a lot of different things that go into whether we're mentally healthy or maybe mentally ill. And so when we consider what are the determinants of mental health, there's a lot that can go into that. So me, for example, I was diagnosed with depression when I was 25. Since then, I've experienced anxiety. Depression and anxiety are still two things that I wrestle with a lot. They're probably chronic, and I'm not sure that will ever leave me. I also had an issue with binge drinking and an eating disorder. So I've got a few things. I check a few boxes in terms of mental illness. But people often ask me, what triggered your depression? What triggered your anxiety? And for depression and anxiety, I'm in that first category of biology. So I am very lucky. I don't know how this happened to me, but I didn't experience any trauma as a child. My family, on my mom's side, there's a lot of mental illness. So the biology piece is that there's a genetic connection. Just like in some families, there may be a lot of diabetes or maybe heart disease. In my mom's side of the family, there's been a lot of mental health challenges over the years and in a few different generations that we know of. Um, because you may have a predisposition doesn't mean that you're going to, experience these things, but it means that you should probably be more aware of them. But there are a lot of other things that go into our health, and our mental health is very similar to our physical health in that it's a spectrum. Some days you may wake up feeling physically great and you've got lots of energy and there's all these things you're going to do. And then other days you're like, oh, I just don't feel a lot of energy today. I'm just going to sit and relax with my coffee and read a book. The same can be true with our mental health. It is a spectrum. The second bucket here is 25% is attributed to healthcare. So when we're talking about healthcare, it is things like our access to it. Do you live in a rural community? Do you live in a large city where actually it's easy to access the emergency room or the hospital? Or do you have access to a family doctor? That's a real challenge. It's a very real challenge right now. What are wait times like? You may have I'll say for me, I may have the luxury of living in a city where, it only takes me 15 minutes to drive to a hospital. I have a family doctor. But what happens when the family doctor refers you to a psychiatrist and then there's a long wait time? What if you have to wait 6 months or a year to get access to healthcare? It's not good. It can exacerbate illness. 10% is actually literally the environment. So, do you have access to green space if you live in a city? What's the air quality like? What's our civic infrastructure like? And I'll go back to the air quality for a minute, but if you recall, the last few summers where we've had wildfires going rampant in this province, We've certainly felt it in the Lower Mainland, and we've experienced poor air quality. That has a direct correlation to our mental health as well. And then 50% is the big bucket of your life. And this is where, things can trigger mental illness. So, for example, when I refer to my abuse of alcohol or developing bulimia, those were acts of attempting to self-soothe because of things that were happening in my life, in particular, really toxic workplace environments. So things like um, your income, your access to education. If you have a disability, you're more likely to experience a mental illness as well, a comorbidity. Do you feel connection in your community, or do you feel social exclusion? Gender and your employment and working conditions. And then things like race and indigenous status. Do you have access to safe and healthy food? Is it affordable? I mean, there's a lot of issues here, right, that are absolutely top of mind in Canada, no matter where you live. And then, of course, housing. Do you have access to housing? Are you experiencing housing instability? So it's a lot of things that go into how mentally healthy or ill we are at any particular time. So there are a lot of different mental illnesses or mental disorders. We're going to share with you 4 of the most common. So on the next slide, Annika, please. The most common here, and I don't know if you want to use the chat and place your guess here. Which of these 4 is the most common mental illness worldwide? So just take a moment to throw something in the chat if you think you know what the answer to this is. We've got depression and anxiety. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in here. It's actually anxiety. I know I thought it was depression too, but anxiety is the #1 mental illness worldwide. So human beings experience a range of emotions as part of life. It's very human to feel emotion. Occasional sadness is not uncommon, and it's a natural part of the human experience. When we have reduced mood for a sustained period, however, we might be experiencing a mood disorder. A mood disorder is a condition that severely impacts a person's emotional state. It can impact how we relate to others, how we view the world, and how we cope with daily situations and stressors, both in life, both at home and at work. And I will say also, I don't know if some of you are familiar with Dr. Susan David. She is a psychologist originally from South Africa. She's written a really fabulous book called Emotional Agility. And one of the things that I took away from Dr. David's work is this: there are no bad emotions. No bad emotions. They're all part of the human experience. And so when we consider that, again, this is Mental Health Week in Canada, the theme is unmasking. And the reason why we don't always unmask is because we feel shame and stigma, because we feel like what we're feeling is wrong, or it's bad, or we're weak. It's not those things. It's not those things at all. We're experiencing illness. And so if we can let go of the shame and guilt, we'll all be healthier for it, because then we can actually start to seek help and we can better support each other as well. I'm going to share on the next couple of slides some things to watch for, or some symptoms of depression and anxiety. And what I will say is that, somebody might experience all of these things. Someone might experience only a few of these things. It's for you to discuss with a healthcare professional to determine what your diagnosis is. And I will say that over the years, as I mentioned, I was first diagnosed when I was 25. I'm in my mid 50s, and I've had recurrence of depression. And every time I've gone back to my doctor to say, oh, you know what, I think I'm sliding back, I think it's coming back, he's always done tests. always. He hasn't just said, oh, well, she's had depression before, this is what it is. Because some physical health issues the symptoms can be similar. So thyroid issues, for example, can mirror some of the symptoms of depression. So this is why I say it's really important. Don't self-diagnose and speak with a healthcare professional. So some of the symptoms of depression, certainly sadness, a depressed mood, but there's a lot of other things that can go into this as well. Loss of interest or pleasure. I know for myself, like I am an avid reader. I absolutely love to read. And I know I'm struggling when I don't want to pick up a book. It's like it's such a sign for me. So it's also important to know yourself and to be able to see when things are shifting for yourself as well. Changes in appetite, or you may have weight loss or weight gain, trouble sleeping, or you might be sleeping too much, loss of energy, increased fatigue. I've touched on this as well. You know, the guilt, shame, feeling worthless. Those are very common for people with a mood disorder. We can be very, very hard on ourselves. A lot of negative thoughts and negative dialogues in our heads. And also really strong impact for me anyways, and I know for others, on my cognitive ability. So I have really hard time thinking, concentrating. I'm usually very decisive. If I'm struggling, I might have more of a difficult time making a decision. And yes, thoughts of death or suicide. On to the next. We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety. Anxiety can manifest itself very physically. Depression can too, and actually how I was first diagnosed is I snapped something in my back and I could barely move for a week. And luckily, even then, all those years ago, my doctor knew it's not just her back, something else going on here. So with anxiety, it can be very physical. So not only may you feel things like fear or panic, uneasiness, it can have some physicality to it as well. So for me, I get very short of breath. It's like I can't take a deep breath. I feel like I can't sit still. Very much, if you've heard of a fight, flight, or freeze, I am always the flight. I got to physically go somewhere else to feel safe. Nausea, heart palpitations, dry mouth. There's a lot that you can be feeling around anxiety. Anxiety also, sometimes people who are having a panic attack or an anxiety attack might think that they're having a heart attack. So, don't wait to see if it goes away. If you are having a moment, please, again, ask for help, whether you need to go to a clinic or emergency room or reach out to somebody who's with you to let them know what's happening. So just a few facts about anxiety, because it is the number one category of mental illness. And I will say, because I don't think I've said this before yet today, mental illness is classified as a disability. And as such, it is a protected ground under human rights, the Human Rights Code and Human Rights Act. So it is a protected ground. You cannot discriminate in employment or other areas, housing and such, based on disability. So these are some facts from the World Health Organization. Anxiety disorders, as I mentioned, the world's most common mental disorders, affecting 301 million people in 2019 worldwide. And we know that the statistics show that rates of mental illness spiked pretty much within 2 weeks of the pandemic. And in Canada, a recent research study from the Canadian Mental Health Association, and I say recent, it was in 2024, has found that rates of mental illness in Canada remain 2.5 times higher than they did pre-pandemic. I think it was 2.5. It's either 2.5 or 3 times higher. So we're not healthy as a nation. More women are affected by anxiety disorders than men. There are absolutely highly effective treatments for anxiety disorders. Again, I'm not going to offer any medical advice. Seek help from a healthcare practitioner. For me, what has been really effective has been a combination of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. I have also, and it pains me to say this because I love coffee, but on occasion I've had to cut my caffeine intake because that has exacerbated my anxiety. And the final statistic here is approximately 1 in 4 people with anxiety disorders receive treatment for this condition. So I don't like this statistic because only 25% of us who are experiencing this are getting help. That's not good enough. And there are probably a lot of reasons why. Things like I said, access to healthcare, the cost of healthcare, and also, you know, the shame and the self stigma associated with it. That's one of the reasons why Annika and I love to do these workshops and to talk about this stuff is because, you know, we should all feel like we can talk about it. So I'm going to pause now and pass it over to Annika.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, hello, everyone. We know that some of you have joined this probably for some general knowledge, and certainly a number of you are looking for specific context of how mental illness or mood disorders can show up in the workplace. Can is a really important word. Kristen's alluded to this. It's a very unique experience for people. So here are some things that you might see in the workplace from an employee. They may take more time off work or be late. They may have a change in their usual personality, kind of a version of they don't seem like themselves lately. They could appear less productive or have trouble concentrating on tasks. You may not be able to see that, or they may not tell you, and they may still think they're productive, yet it's taking them longer to do tasks. It's really important, though, to note, and I know Kristen alluded to this as well, is that you may have colleagues or employees that you work with every day who live with a mental health issue. They haven't told you. They're either able to mask their symptoms or they have effective treatments and supports in place. Symptoms of burnout from chronic workplace stress, here are some of them, is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism, cynicism, or apathy, and reduced professional efficacy. It can be a slow decline, and as I mentioned before, is they can be working harder and be less effective. And again, just a reminder on burnout is it's not a medical condition, but it can lead to mental illness. Now, this concept, there's not a lot on this slide, but I'm just going to stop here because, and we're, going to speak about it. Please put a question or comment in the chat if you like, or we'll have a Q&A at the end of our presentation. But this is a duty. It's a very real duty, regardless of the size of the business that you have, is there is a duty to inquire that is often misunderstood. So in Canada, all employers have a duty to inquire, which means that if you think an employee is experiencing a mental health challenge that is impacting them in the workplace, you must ask. So recently, we continue to look at the research and the articles we're seeing, and there was one in Forbes recently that boards, senior executives, they're talking about mental health and mental well-being more, and they're educating themselves on this duty to inquire and trying to put processes in place to report and support leaders to do this because it's not easy. It's not easy, and that's why this slide is here, this is just a suggestion of where to start. This particular phrase is one that I used probably 20 years ago in my career with an employee. And I'm going to be really honest about this, is I noticed that they did not seem like themselves. This was my first bigger management job. I had a team of 8 and I had one-to-ones with all my employees. And I noticed this and I didn't know what words to use. So I let more meetings go and more time pass. I thought about it outside work. I thought about it on my way into work, is how can I say something that doesn't feel like judgment? How do I have the trust and rapport with this person that this is going to land well? My intent is good, but what's the impact going to be? And is it going to open up a conversation or close it down? I will say to you that finding some words, any words, is better than having no words at all. There's a real human case. This could be a lifeline. This could be serious for someone. If you say something like this and they say everything's okay, that might be where it stops. You may want to ask again. It may be the beginning of a few conversations, So the legal imperative is one thing, but there's absolutely a human imperative to ask. We're going to give you some tips to have psychologically safe. Some of you probably are aware of psychological health and safety, the national standard. This is in our work, Kristen and I, we reflect often on what was the most asked for education or workshops in a given year. And in 2024, so last year, this was certainly within the top 3, is psychological health and safety. And relative to this topic is if you don't have that level of psych safety and trust, it's going to be really hard to talk about mental health. So these are some tips. Be empathetic. When Kristen said this at the beginning is I still think of my early days in HR where we talked about leadership competencies. We didn't talk about empathy. That was a soft skill and a nice to have. And it may still feel that way to some of you. Yeah, I'm empathetic. I care. It's absolutely a real direct correlation to mental health and well-being. And I'll give you an example. If your mindset is truly empathetic and curious, we would suggest to you is you will have a different tone of voice and different body language. That's a little difficult to translate exactly the same over video and certainly over email or a phone call. But when you're in person, over 90% of the meaning that we take from any conversation is tone of voice and body language. Only 7% is words. So my previous slide of find some words to inquire, they don't have to be perfect words. If you're facing the person and you have a really open body language and your tone and you're asking curious questions, it's going to have a different impact. That's holding space for someone to share if they choose to share. And that segues into, choosing curiosity over judgment. We are hardwired. Over 90% of our thinking is unconscious or implicit. So if you've done any work on unconscious bias, that's just a fact. That's not a judgment. That's how our brains are hardwired. We go to what do I know? And it's really uncomfortable sometimes to sit in that space of what don't I know? With mental health, there are going to be things you don't know about what that person's going through, and you don't have to know. So we're encouraging you to sit with what could be a little bit of discomfort and choose curiosity over judgment. And then you can get to next steps and how you can support that person. Anticipate reactions and plan for them. You will not be able to do this exhaustively, and nor should you feel you have to. And I've already mentioned, and I think Kristen's alluded to, is oftentimes this is more than one conversation. And listen first, act second, get support if you need it. You may be a small business that doesn't have, in-house human resources. It may be a colleague that you're asking. It may be someone from a different organization. It may be HR. It may be your employee assistance provider. If you have that through your insurance, is getting some support for what options you have and what you should say or do next. And I'll transition back to Kristen.
Thank you. So this slide, we don't want to spend a bunch of time on it, but it is really important. Canada has a suicide crisis helpline. You might want to post this in your workplace. If you're a leader, you might want to keep this number nearby. And the reason why we want to talk about this is because we don't talk about it. Suicide is a dirty word. And so if you have an employee who is really struggling, or a colleague or a family member, ask them if they have any plans to harm themselves. If they say yes, you do not have to have any answers. Remember, you're not a healthcare professional. Call the helpline. Ask the person, is there somebody I can call for you? Do you have a loved one that you want me to call? Do you want me to call your doctor? Should I take you to an emergency room? Should I call 911? That's what you need to do. You don't need to fix them. Just like if an employee broke their leg, you're not going to put the cast on for them. You're going to call the people that are going to help them. You're not going to put an idea in their head. You could literally be offering a lifeline. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So this is the second question we get asked all the time, and certainly both when we were both in-house working with managers and as HR consultants. This was a tricky thing for leaders to navigate, and certainly for HR people too. So you've got an employee you've noticed that they're not themselves. Maybe you've noticed that, they've been, taking more sick days, or maybe they're later, or maybe it's even things like they used to come in and their clothes were always like neatly pressed and clean, and now they just look a little bit messier, and that's not them. So you've identified, right, that there's something. That's triggered your duty to inquire. So you've had a conversation with them. Maybe they've disclosed, they've said, you know what, I'm struggling with depression. They might not disclose. They might say, you know what, I'm struggling with a health challenge. And that's all you need to know. You don't need to know what the health challenge is. All you need to know is that there's something going on with them, health-wise, that is impacting their performance in the workplace. So now you know that, you can consider, okay, you know what, actually, this is good. I know now. I know that this person is struggling. I'm going to help them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to coach them. I'm going to help them. So that help might be that I'm going to adjust perhaps how they work, when they work, where they work. So an adjustment to the work is also what's known more formally as a workplace accommodation. If somebody has disclosed to you that they're experiencing a health challenge and they know also that it's impacting them in the workplace, please don't performance manage them. That could get you into a lot of hot water. Now, that's not to say that you can't performance manage somebody who has a disability or a mental health challenge. It just means that you need to explore the coaching and the accommodation and the adjustments first.
Kristen, I just
So,
want to add something. I was thinking about this workshop and thinking about all of you. I don't know you, but why you might have joined. So I'm going to say something that I hope at least one or two of you are thinking. And this has happened to me, is if you are performance managing someone, and maybe they don't like that performance management, not a lot of people do, or progressive discipline or whatever it's escalated to, will anyone say that they're not well, or will they go on a leave as a result of that performance management? I would say few people will do that who don't genuinely need or have some kind of a health issue. I don't know how many people will do it. I have had people I performance manage go on a leave during the performance management. Again, as a leader, my choice is to listen. My only choice is to understand that and accommodate that, as Kristen mentioned, not to judge or go to a place of, was it because I was performance managing them? And again, I'm going to say after 25 years, there's very, very few people I think that they would do it because of it. So I think that what the advice that we're suggesting to you is know that this is complex and they can be intermingled sometimes. Yet it's more on the side of, I think it's harder for employees to talk about the mental health challenge that is affecting their performance than the few that might say, I don't like being performance managed and now I'm not well.
right. And by the way, performance management is not bullying or harassment.
Yes.
That's a whole other workshop though, right, Annika?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the second legal imperative here, which is the duty to accommodate. So in Canada, the legal duty to accommodate means that you need to accommodate a person with a disability up to undue hardship. So what the heck does undue hardship mean? Well, okay, Annika and I have a small business. It's only two of us. Say we had a third employee, or we had one employee because we're partners. And that employee came to us and said, I need this accommodation for my disability and it costs $5,000. And I need it like tomorrow. And Annika and I were to say, okay, maybe $5,000 isn't the right example. Say it was $10,000. We said, okay, I think that's going to have, that's going to be a financial hardship on our business. Like that's maybe a lot of money. Same situation, but say it's RBC. Their threshold for undue hardship is way higher than a small two-person organization. They have way more people and financial resources. So if an employee goes to them and says, well, I need an accommodation and it costs $10,000, it's going to be pretty difficult for RBC to turn around and say no, because that's a hardship on us. And the reason why I say this is you turn down an accommodation and an employee takes you to a human rights tribunal, you're going to be in a difficult situation if you have turned it down without due consideration. Here's the really great news, is that accommodations, the vast majority of them, cost under $500 or are free and are simple to implement. So you might have to provide accommodation such as, medical leave. It could be flexible scheduling. It could be more frequent breaks. Reasonable modifications to duties. Maybe if it's an employee with an anxiety disorder and they work in an office, they need to be in a quiet location. Because let me tell you, as a person with anxiety, open office it can really exacerbate my anxiety. So it can be really inexpensive and simple. Now, granted, many organizations, the bulk of organizations and businesses are small business in BC. And there are certain things that maybe have to be done. You serve clients or customers. And so, you have less flexibility in your accommodations. You could say instead, you're going to allow that employee to maybe take 4 15-minute breaks over the course of the day because they need more frequent breaks. So there can be small things that we can do to accommodate. Maybe an employee is taking a medication that's making them sleepy and they're having a hard time getting to work on time. And that's maybe one of the things you've noticed, is that they're late. Is it possible to adjust their start time so they come in half an hour later and they work half an hour later? So they're still doing the work. They're still able to come to work, but you've just adjusted the hours in which they work. So let's move on to this topic now around normalizing talking about mental health, because we have to normalize this topic. If we don't, we're still going to be playing catch up. We're still going to be trying to put out mental health fires instead of getting upstream. So here are some things you can do. Add a standing agenda item to your meetings. Now, it doesn't have to be, okay, every Monday we're going to talk about mental illness. That might be a heavy topic on a Monday. It could be every Monday meeting, we're going to spend a quick go around the table or the Zoom room to say, what was your glimmer this weekend? So what was one thing that just made you smile? If you want to pass, you can pass. So maybe my glimmer was, I saw this really cool bird out in my backyard that I haven't seen before. So you're just starting to normalize things that, make you smile and kind of shifting the energy around the topic. Educate yourself. Educate yourself, your leaders, and your employees on this. I know there aren't always a lot of big budgets for these things, particularly in smaller organizations. The great news is that there are a lot of community-based organizations, on mental health. CMHA, the Canadian Mental Health Association, has not only their national organization, their provincial organization, but also there's one in North Van, there's probably one in Surrey. They're all over Metro Vancouver. And they would probably love to come in and talk to your employees, or there are free webinars that you can sign up for. The next one seems obvious, but we forget this sometimes. We forget to just check in with people. How often have you, if you've been in an office, if you're working in an office, do you pass somebody in the hall and you go, oh, hey, Annika, how are you? But you don't even stop walking. You keep walking. Annika said, oh, I'm fine. We don't actually stop and connect on a human level with people as much as we should. And leaders, it's okay to stop by and say, hey, how's it going on that project? Tell me more about that. We need to have more informal opportunities to check in. Ask a question. How's that impacting you? Yeah, I heard that there's that challenging update about that other department or that thing in the city. How's that impacting you on what do you think? Let's have some human conversations. And this next one's so important. If you're a leader, please model healthy behaviors. Don't send your emails at 11 o'clock at night. Something I learned from Annika is that she likes to queue up she calls it queue up her emails. So she'll prepare drafts, keep them in her draft folder, and then the next day she'll send them. And then I'm not inundated, at midnight with things coming in from her. But, it's little things that you can do. Also, please take your break. Don't eat your lunch at your desk. Schedule your vacation time. Use all of your vacation time. And leaders, talk a little bit about your own well-being. Now, I'm not saying it's still the workplace. You still get to choose how much you share about yourself. So when I say be authentic or vulnerable, you decide what that is. But when I think back to the leaders that have most inspired me over my career, it's the ones who are pretty human. The ones who could say, yeah, this big change that our organization is going through, it is challenging. I'm finding, I'm trying to process it too. So they didn't say, oh man, I can't sleep at night and I'm really worried, because of course, as a leader, you also have to show up in a way that, supports your employees. But you can also show a little bit of a human side. And that will help you to normalize the topic of mental health, because remember, it's a spectrum. Sometimes we feel quite mentally healthy and well. Sometimes we don't feel so great. Sometimes we're actually in the illness stage. Now, the next slide here is really around mental health first aid. And while I haven't taken the course, I have not encountered a single person who has taken it who hasn't liked it or found it useful. And and I know there's somebody, a colleague of mine here, who could probably even pipe in a little bit later and share perspective on this. But so my first manager job, when I was I was the first manager of diversity and inclusion at Vancity Credit Union. And we had worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Open Door Group as part of a pilot project for mental health first aid, where the first aid attendants would be people with lived experience. And so, we do a great job in organizations of saying, occupational health and safety is very important. Make sure you know who your first aid attendant is. The defibrillator is over there. Don't forget, don't pile boxes in front of that door. But we don't always spend enough time doing that around psychological health and safety. And so to have a mental health first aid team or mental health first aid attendants can be a really powerful thing. And so what we have on here on this slide, and I'll just explain a little bit about it. This is a program that's actually not just in Canada. It's in many countries and has been proven to be really effective. And so the training is provided through the Mental Health Commission of Canada, also a number of other organizations provided as well. But in the course, you gain a solid understanding of the 5 basic actions of ALGE, which are A, assess the risk of suicide or harm. L, listen non-judgmentally. G, give reassurance. E, encourage professional support. And the final E, encourage other supports. Now, I just want to go back to G for a minute, because G is not toxic positivity. So to give reassurance is not to say, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, my friend had that. It was fine. That's toxic. It can also be gaslighting and microaggressions. When we say things like that, we can minimize it and then make that person feel minimized. So reassurance is, I'm here with you. I see that this is really difficult. I understand that this must be really, really hard for you. I can see that you're in pain and distress. I'm here for you and I'm here with you. That's what giving reassurance is. It's also the empathy piece as well. All right, so we have some questions that CEOs, people leaders, HR folks can consider, and even employees in an organization. So a little bit of self-reflection here. Do we have a clearly defined strategy supporting health and wellness with measures? The with measures is also important. What effective mental health and wellness tools are we investing in to help support employees? And do I, as a leader, model healthy behaviors? Just a few things to consider there. Just a couple more slides, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Annick and I are big fans of Brene Brown. This is one of my favorite quotes of hers. What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. So here it is. This is your leadership superpower. It's just your human superpower. We all have this ability. Sometimes we just need to exercise this muscle a little bit more, and it's empathy. Workplaces that focus on fostering an empathetic work culture are more productive and have higher employee satisfaction and retention rates than those that don't. Businesses that integrate emotional intelligence into their companies through flexible policies and empathetic management styles outperform their rivals. And we know that organizations that prioritize psychological health and safety reap all of these benefits. And we know that because Google did a study called Project Aristotle back in 2015, where they found that the number one most important factor for high-performing teams, psychological health and safety. The Harvard Business Review has even developed an empathy index to rate organizations. Some of the ones high on that list are Facebook and Apple. And really, empathy has never been more needed than it is right now. Empathy really means accepting other people as they are. During, when people are going through a mental health crisis, they're not working to their full capacity or capability. So accepting and acknowledging that will help you foster trust and encourage employees to share with you when they might be struggling. If each person feels like they can be themselves at work, their true self, they can take that mask off, your team will be better off. And when there's trust in your team, feedback and creativity, innovation, these things flow freely. And these are really essential qualities of a productive, effective team. We've got a really long comment in here.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for adding that. I don't know if I can read all of that, but
You know what, the gist of it, Kristen, is I
yeah,
think
thank
similar
you.
to what I was, I had a chance to look at it before. I might not see the other ones as well, but I think the gist of it was around that, trust and accountability. So if someone is misusing the flexibility that you offer, how do you deal with that? How do you talk about it? I'm just going to say that is really tough. And sometimes it'll be your assumption. How do you test that? I'll offer my perspective, and maybe Kristen can as well, is human nature for me when I've suspected that has been that I don't want it to be true. I've had my own human reaction to it, and it's been conversations that I've wanted to almost avoid, and I've gone closer to it. So if that is what I suspect, is I don't avoid those conversations. I stay closer to that person in talking about the accommodations, not their illness, but what have we agreed to? Is it working? Sometimes that's how I dial up the accountability. It's just face to face. It's time. It's time as a leader, and I know we're all busy, but that has been for me where I've been able to either settle my nerves that someone isn't misusing it, or sometimes the misuse stops because the person realizes that I am going to stay close to this. I'm not judging them, but I'm staying close enough that it isn't. And in my experience of managing so many teams, it's been very few people that I actually believe were misusing it. Very, very few.
Yeah. I would agree. That's my experience as well. Yeah. Great question. There's a lot of great questions in here right now. My goodness. I want to touch on the one, how do we handle when a team member with undiagnosed mental health issues is causing confusion and tension in the team? So I'm in St. John's because I spoke at a conference actually this morning, a version of this workshop. And afterwards, somebody came up to me and asked the same question. So here's my personal experience with this. This is back when I worked in-house somewhere, and there was an employee who I knew had been referred through a work program through the Canadian Mental Health Association. I knew that this person had a mental health challenge. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that as part of that program, they were working with people with mental illness. A few months into the employment, there were some issues that started to crop up with this person, some performance issues. And the manager did everything that they're supposed to do. So the HR person and the manager were working together. HR person said, ask it's a duty to inquire, ask them, because the manager thought something's going on. I think it's mental health. Ask the employee, they didn't ask them if they had mental illness. Please don't ever ask that question. The hiring manager or the manager said to the employee, I see that you're struggling with this. Is there anything going on for you that you want to talk about that could be impacting it? Nope. The manager asked repeatedly. So a few times, I think probably about 3 or 4 times. Every time the employee said no. The employee might not tell you. You might know in your gut that something is going on. And by the way, I couldn't say anything because I can't disclose that. It's not my place to do it. Finally, the manager and the HR person came to me as the manager of diversity and said, what do we do with this situation? And I said, well, you've exhausted the duty to inquire. You've coached, you've performance managed, you've gone down that whole long path. This was over many months. If it's not working out, you can terminate the person. Obviously, that's not the goal. The goal of coaching and performance management is to correct the behavior. But if the employee is not going to meet you halfway or participate in the process, then sometimes, unfortunately, you do need to terminate. But you need to go through all of those stages. If you work for an organization that has an HR team and you're I keep saying hiring manager, you're a manager, please lean on your HR team. You can also reach out to a mental health organization to get supports on how to deal with these situations. Just make sure that you exercise the duty to inquire, you've done what you can to accommodate, and document. I know that's an HR joke, but you have to document everything.
And Kristen, thank you. There's a comment about, I know we're coming down to time, but about that it's hard to understand people's feelings. Yes, and yes, it is. And especially when it's unfamiliar to us, maybe it's something we haven't gone through, or we have particular views from our upbringing, or what's appropriate in the workplace. All sorts of things come in. And as Kristen said, mental health and well-being is a spectrum of well and not well. So it will be hard to be empathetic and to understand. And someone else made a comment about, what about mental health resilience? It takes resilience to learn about this, to be mentally healthy and well ourselves, and to support others too. So it's kind of a notion of oxygen mask on first. And for those of you that have joined this, we feel like that might be a version of that for you, is you want to educate yourself. And we're telling you that it's going to be complex and messy sometimes, yet it's unavoidable. We need to have more conversations like this, because we've shown you the cost of not having them.
Thank you. And I know we have to wrap up really quickly. I just want to touch on something. So Nathan, you commented on construction sites. So we still know that construction is predominantly male dominated. Absolutely, there are women that work in the industry and non-binary, but men still have a really difficult time talking about mental health challenges. That's another hurdle that we need to get past. So I think that's where it's also really important to normalize, talk about this stuff before it's a problem. And lean in on, again, if you've got HR folks, but also organizations like the Mental Health Commission of Canada, Canadian Mental Health Association as well. And just really quickly on resiliency, we gain resiliency when we go through hard times. That is such a simplistic response. And I don't mean to make it simplistic, but that's your 30-second answer. But there's a lot of great research out there on resiliency as well.
Kristen, I'll only say, Nathan, if someone's not fit to work and it's not safe, that's a different bar.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys very much for that great presentation. I did want to just remind everybody who's here today, in order to be eligible for the honorarium that was posted to the Third Board of Trade, you have to fill out the form that I'm sending right now, and we're going to be closing it on Friday. So make sure to take it down now. We will be getting it to you guys within the next day or two as well. But get it done right away. That's the easiest way. I know as somebody with ADHD, doing it right away sometimes is the best way to get it done at all. So just a little bit of a warning from my own experience. I will pass it over to Surrey Board of Trade, but before that, I'd like to just thank Kristen and Annika for the great presentation today, as well as Rona from the Surrey Board of Trade, Rona and Heather. And I thank you, everybody, for showing up today. We really appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to be here. So I'll pass it over now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, Annika, and Dylan for being with us today and sharing this important information. We will be sending you the recording and the facilitator's contact information after this session. Many more of these type of sessions are coming up, so please be sure to check our website at businessinsurrey.com. Make it a great business morning, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.